to start out with, I think we'd just like you to give us a little background on how you arrived at the decision to run for mayor and your relative newcomer to the council. You haven't been on there a long time, but talk about what that experience has been like and what led you to want to take this next step.
Sure, absolutely. Well, a couple of things. First, thank you very much for this opportunity, and thanks for everybody getting together this morning. I apologize again for being a few minutes late, and I apologize for the fact that my face is moving extremely slowly, at least for me. It's probably doing the same for you. So, is my voice coming through okay? I mean, is the audio fine?
Okay. The audio is just fine, so.
That's good. All right. Well, at least we've got that much. People generally have seen me, I guess, before. So, yeah, the question that you asked, I love the way you asked it too, Amy. How do you arrive at this decision? Because I'm just going to be completely honest with you. It wasn't an easy one. We've had a mayor who's been in the job for a very long time in Roy Buell, and he has made this position, I think, something that is a real challenge at this point. I mean, this is a big. It's like a big full part-time job is really what we have now as a mayor in Dubuque. And I don't argue with that. I think it's actually a very good thing that we are in this place. But I take that with a lot of respect. I have a lot of respect for the office and for the job itself and for city government in the city of Dubuque. So for me, I think some people have actually said just right off the bat that the whole reason that I ran for council was to run for this position right here. It's entirely untrue. In fact, when people were first asking me if I was going to run, the answer was no. It was honestly, when you think about doing something this big, you have to think about not just yourself, but you have to think about your entire family, my immediate family, my extended family, everything that's going on in our lives. And does this fit in there? And the answer that my wife Jennifer and I came to at first was, no, we're gonna hold off. This is too soon. I've only been on council for 2 years. But what really started to help make the decision, there were a couple of different things. I mean, for one, there were a lot of people encouraging me to do this from all over the community, and I think. I've always found it's really important to listen when people speak up in that way. And if they say that there's a specific reason why, you as a person should be doing something and they give you some compelling reasons, you have to listen. The other thing too, is that I'm just generally concerned right now for the state of our democracy in our society. And I think that any role that we can play as people in working to, oh my gosh, my computer, hang on, my camera just went out on me here. You can still hear me maybe?
We can still hear you.
Okay. Just can't see me. It looks like I'm coming back. So yep, here we are.
Yep. That's okay.
So I'm generally concerned for the state of our democracy and our society. I want to make sure that we have, we do whatever we can. And I've sort of just made the decision in my life in the last few years that if there is a time that I need to step up and use the skills that I have to try and make the world a better place than what I found it, I'm going to do it. I've just sort of, the fears of doing that have been kind of washed away. A lot of the pandemic helped with that too. But so bottom line is, I know there's a long answer, but it was not an easy decision. It was not an automatic decision for me. And it was something that I take great care and respect in. So what we need right now is we need strong leadership. We need leadership that's going to unify people. I think we need leadership that's going to excite people and inspire in some way. And I'm confident I have the skills to do that. And I think that when that is the case, then I feel compelled to step up. And when I say compelled, I'm completely comfortable doing it. It's just that it's something that I feel I should do for the sake of our community and just take on whatever responsibilities I can. Bottom line is, if I lose the race, I have plans to stay on council and continue the good work that we're trying to do and just try to be a good person and do good stuff. So that's a long answer, but it was a long thought process for us as a family and for me personally to be able to get to this point.
I think your point about that you could be inspirational to people is an interesting one. What do you think that might look like if people were more inspired, more compelled to be involved in their city? How does that translate to better things?
Right now, what I've seen more often during the last year with the pandemic is a growing discouragement and anger and frustration with government in general. I think it's the number one thing that we all need to be concerned about, really. Um, so what I really want to do on a local level is help people to see the difference we can make together when we think about what's going on in our own backyard. I can't tell you even the number of people that I've talked to just in the last 6 months who are telling me, I have to turn the news off. I can't watch it anymore. I can't think about what's going on in Washington, D.C. I get frustrated when I think about what's going on in Des Moines. And then that trickles down to local politics too. But here, the difference is, Bob, I think I saw you at Millwork last night. Were you at the market last night?
I was.
I didn't
Yeah.
get a chance to come over and say hello, but because you were gone by the time I turned around. But we see each other when we go to things and go to events. We aren't caricatures. We're neighbors. We're real people who are in the same events and doing the same things. I went to Millwork from the Lincoln Carnival where my son was doing his last fall carnival because he's in 5th grade. And those community events are things that we can all kind of be together in. We can do this on a local level in a way that I think looking inspired is being excited about being able to help each other, figuring out what our place is in trying to make the community a better place. We might not all agree on how to go about that, but I think one of the things that I see us finding agreement in is the fact that we do care about someone else in our community. We care about each other in some way. Even all the candidates that have run for mayor this time around, you can see us doing different things in our own way because we care about somebody. Those are the things that I think we can really grab onto and inspire. It's like this little simple stuff that we really need to get back to that just give us a sense of civic pride. And that's something that I want to foster.
Can you talk about some specifics of something that you might introduce at the council table? Were you in that position of leadership that you think might lead to some of these kinds of things, some sort of tangible planks?
I actually think that it's less about at this point, at least in my mind, I think it's less about policy and more about behavior. So I think one of the things that people see in our political leaders right now is a disconnection from the rest of the community and from the citizenry at large. We have people, I think people feel like they can't reach out and be able to communicate easily one-on-one with anybody who's elected, that's been elected into office. I think that one of the biggest things that I need to do as the next mayor is get people, is show up as often as I can in as many places as I can with as many different groups of people to be able to bring them into the process. One of the things that has legitimately surprised me in this role on council is how infrequently people reach out to me and how infrequently I see people attend events that we have, be a part of meetings. COVID played a huge role in that because as we went online for everything, people's access was just less and less. And that was very problematic and something that really concerned me. But it also was not entirely different from what it was right before the pandemic either. People just aren't generally all that involved in local government. I think that me reaching out to people directly can start to bring people into that process. So I don't know, Amy, if it's really a policy issue so much as it is one that is what we need to see in the behavior of our elected officials. So that's where I'm thinking about it right now, at least. That's a good question, though, because, we have so many ways that people can get involved. We've got commissions, we've got, these boards, there's lots of different things happening. But what are some other ways that we can get people involved in that process more tangibly? I do like that question. That's something I'm definitely going to be thinking about.
I know when we talked to you 2 years ago yesterday, according to my notes.
No kidding.
Yep, we're running for council. And you talked a little bit about that kind of engagement then and wanting to do to host frequent meetings to hear from constituents and email updates from council members, and getting better at social media and things like that. Obviously, town hall meetings or constituent meetings became more complicated with COVID, but do you feel like you've been able to do some of that in your first couple of years? Upping your social media presence and emailing folks?
Not nearly as much as I would have liked. There were a lot of things that broke my heart during COVID. I mean, a lot of things. But this was one of them, was just a complete loss of foundation of how to reach out to people effectively. I'll, again, complete honesty here. I felt like I was just swimming in the middle of the ocean and trying to figure this particular issue out when COVID hit and as we got deeper into it. I mean, especially near the end of 2020, and when social media became a place where you didn't communicate and reach out to one another and try to share good ideas, but it was a place where people just cut each other down. It became very difficult to be able to figure out how to reach out. And this actually goes back to one of the questions you asked, or the very first question you asked, my process of thinking about getting into what I'm doing now and running for mayor. Personally, I struggled with the idea that it had been so hard to reach out to people. We hadn't come together. People hadn't seen me in the way that I wanted them to be able to see me publicly, very often. And now I was going to go out and start asking people for their votes. I felt it felt very disingenuous to me at first. I was pleasantly surprised to find out that other people didn't seem to feel that way at all. I mean, other people were, in fact, running this time is very different than running for my council seat, because the conversations that I've had with people, it's been very obvious that we haven't been talking, and people haven't had people stop by their house to talk to them in a very long time, because the conversations I've had have been long. I mean, if I had an average of a 5-minute conversation the last time I ran, the average now is probably closer to 10 to 15 minutes. And I'm not even kidding about that. People just want to talk. They want to be heard. They want to know that somebody's there to listen. And we haven't been able to do that very much. So what I've found is that people have been very receptive to me showing up and talking to them. And I try to make it as much as I can more about what they want to talk about than about just me, spouting off about myself. I really want to have a conversation and hear what people have to say.
And what are some of the key issues they're concerned about?
So, one of the interesting things, I had a conversation yesterday about this with some folks, with some UAW workers, actually, with the deer strike. So much of the union question and the corporation question seems to be a partisan one. But one of the things that has struck me is that if I knock on the door of a person who identifies themselves as Republican and middle class, and then I knock on the door of a Democrat who identifies as middle class, their biggest concern is the erosion of the middle class together. They've said the same thing to me. The fact that the middle class seems to be disappearing, and people don't feel like they have anybody who has their back. And I've been struck by how that's a nonpartisan issue. And I don't necessarily think that, like, those two people, those examples that I gave you right there, I'm not sure they recognize that they're on the same team, that they're on the same, they're in the same boat in a lot of ways. That's been a big issue. So wages has been a big issue. Jobs. Everybody's got the question of what in the world is going on. Why aren't people working? Where did they all go? What's happening? There are so many different pieces to that puzzle that we need to figure out. And that's a big one that people are talking about. I get the sense
are those things that you see the council being able to address?
Yeah, in some way, for sure. I think that the issue of the middle class piece, I think, is, when you talk about wages and workforce, those are definitely things that we can work on as a council. I mean, one of the bright spots in 2020 and 2021 was this Simmons deal that we were able to strike as a city. That deal came along with pre-printed wages in the wording of the development agreement. Simmons said, we are going to pay people at this rate, and we're going to do it across the board. I mean, it was a full page that they gave to the Iowa Economic Development Association. And that, to me, was a real message that, companies are starting to wake up to the fact that they need to do this. And it's going to put some pressure on other companies in the city of Dubuque to do the same. And we're seeing that now. I don't think that Simmons is the only reason for that, but it's definitely a piece of it. I mean, there's real upward pressure to be able to raise wages in the city of Dubuque. And I do think that the city government has a role to play in that. We can't do it by ourselves, but there's a role to play in it. So I think that that's one thing for sure. And then workforce issues, one of the things that we've been talking about a lot, this comes up in, I'm on the Dubuque Initiatives Board. We've been talking about this almost every time we get together, is childcare and figuring out how we can actually increase the number of slots for childcare, increase access to it, especially outside of the traditional hours. So flex time, second shift, all those things that we've been looking at for years. But now we need to seriously do it because it's become, we're facing this reckoning where it's become a real issue that keeps people out of the workforce. So those are two things that I think we can definitely do something about.
Well, I know there's a lot of city issues. We want to discuss them and let my colleagues jump in here with some questions on some of those.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure, I'll jump in right away. So one of the hot issues in the city is the Five Flags Center.
Mhm.
And I think that most people would agree that the citizens of Dubuque need to vote on it and make a decision. And so I'm curious as to where you stand with the Five Flags, and how you would respond if the referendum were to fail.
That second question, Mike, that you asked is one that we haven't been asked very often. What is the response we're going to have if it does fail? So my position on this, I think I really do. I'm confident in saying that I've been very consistent on my position with Five Flags. We need to have the community conversation. Again, with heartbreaks with COVID, this was one of them again, that we had to pull this off the ballot during the time because we couldn't have this conversation. We couldn't move forward given the situation. We need the community to be able to fully discuss this. We haven't done this at all yet. I want to make that really clear. The community has not had a really good conversation about the pros and the cons of what this is. What that conversation would look like is we have a group of people who advocate for building a new Five Flags, especially, the one that we were going to put on the ballot, the 6,000 plus seat arena, $70+ million. What's the reason for that? There's a group of people ready and willing to put forward their arguments for why we need to do that. I'm sure there's another group of people who are ready to organize to say why we should not. I really want to hear those two arguments. And more than that, I want everybody to hear them. I want the full community to have that discussion. We as a council have been clear that's not our place to do that, to advocate one or the other. But at the same time, I will say that I don't see how we move forward into the next decade and 20 years as a city without something like Five Flags, where Five Flags is. It is absolutely essential to our economic development in the downtown area and as a city as a whole. I think people get way too stuck on concerts that they might not be interested in going to, and they don't think about some of the other big events. There's a great example downtown right now. You've probably seen all the dogs walking around with that Dock Dogs competition. It fills up hotel rooms. People are eating at restaurants, and they're doing it all weekend long. And that's something that we cannot overlook when we talk about what this is. We need something like it downtown. So your second question, if it does fail, that's a great question, because then what do you do? I'm starting to hear people who were advocating for the let's go big. They're advocating for the big picture one, saying now maybe we should go a little smaller. Maybe that would be something that would be easier for the community to swallow. And I don't know. I don't think that's a terrible idea to explore. Maybe we don't put the 6,500 seat arena on the ballot after all. Maybe we look at something smaller. So that's an option there. What I really hope we don't have to look at is a situation where we just say, okay, well, this didn't pass. We're not going to be able to pass anything to build something new at all. So let's just keep paying for Band-Aids. I actually think that's the most expensive option in the long run, and I don't think that it's going to help us.
So with that, I agree that paying or putting Band-Aids on it's not going to fix it. But where I get concerned is that taxpayers see the Band-Aids coming out of your checkbook, and they see the building of a new facility coming out of their checkbook because of the impact on taxes.
Sure. I get your point. but I don't know if I agree with the different checkbooks. I mean, this is all paid for by taxpayers. It's all paid for by us as a community. You know, I don't have a city checkbook. I mean, the city doesn't have that. We use tax money to be able to get that done. And I looked at all that as the same. I mean, it is all of our money that we are using to provide goods and services for all of us. So
And I understand that. And maybe the clarifying point I need to make is taxes are going to go up for sure with a new Five Flags. So
Right.
it's impacting they see the immediate impact on their checkbook versus incremental tax increases that might happen as part of the city's operating budget.
Yeah. We have to think about taxation as investment. When do we need to make an investment in our city? You know, this is where I think you can personally connect it to whatever somebody's life is like. You know, I mean, when you think about your own home or you think about buying a vehicle, oftentimes we do things like we go into debt to be able to do that. But and the home run in that situation is you go into debt to do it, but you have a plan to pay it back. And you know that you're going to be able to do that. And you do it for a very good reason. You buy a vehicle because you need something to get you to work, to get your kids to school, to do all these different things. It's an investment in your future, in your family's future. I look at things like Five Flags in that way as a city. It's an investment in our future as a community. We talk about growth a lot. We talk about drawing in younger workers. We had this conversation at the Chamber Forum yesterday. It was kind of the theme was drawing in younger workers, growing as a population, making sure we can keep business here and keep business growing. You don't do those things if you don't invest in your community. So any form of taxation that we have, whether our taxes go up or we're able to keep them the same or even lower them, we have to think about what we're investing in the community. That to me is the key to it all. So the bigger question then is, do we as a community see Five Flags as an investment or not? My personal answer would be yes. I think it is an investment. What size should that investment be? That's a great question. I want to have more of a discussion about that.
Thanks.
Sure.
I'll jump in here. Brad, so one of the things that we've written a fair amount about, it's been in the news a lot, relates to kind of the city employees and workforce culture there. We've written about some, high profile lawsuits, some accusations about, not great workplace situations there. Obviously, that also was one of the things that came up a couple of years ago when there was the push to fire Mr. Van Milligan. Like folks in favor of that cited some of the things going on there with the workplace. So I'm kind of curious what your assessment is of the job that Mike Van Milligan is doing, but also kind of the workplace culture. How are city employees feeling? Have some of those issues been addressed?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Dustin. So I'm going to talk about history first, and then I'm going to talk about now. I think that'll be the easiest way to structure this conversation. Everything that we're talking about with wanting to fire City Manager Van Milligan and the lawsuits that you were referencing, those things happened in a time that was prior to when I was elected. So one of the things that was important for me right away was to get some sort of a sense of what facts does the city have discussing those particular issues. So I think it was in the first 2 weeks of 2020, so in January of 2020, when I first got elected, that I sat down with City Attorney Brumwell and I said, Krenna, I want everything you have. And I want to see it all. And the meeting was at least an hour and a half, 2 hours long. I had a long discussion with her, tried to understand the context, the historical context of all these different things. Because obviously on the night that I was elected was the night that the information was released from the closed session that were accusations from the previous council. So I wanted to know about the accuracy of those. And then I wanted to hear a little bit more from what the perspective of the city attorney was. And I also had a conversation with City Manager Van Milligan about this. What I will say is that after I had those conversations and after I looked at those details and after I had met with every single department because that's part of a new council member's job. We go through and do an orientation, every single department head. And after I did all of that, I voted to retain City Manager Van Milligan. So I think that speaks to what I found in looking at all those details. With that said, I do think that in the past it is still very likely that, it sounds to me like there were issues with how some things were handled, kind of throughout many years. And I would say from a human resources standpoint, one of the things that I have been extremely impressed with since I came onto council is the work of our new human resources director, Shelley Stickford. She herself is an attorney. She has excellent experience, and I have seen nothing but improvement come from how she's writing new administrative rules for city government, looking at policies that are in place, trying to improve upon those. I think those things are all moving in exactly the right direction. So overall, I'm very pleased with what I'm seeing in terms of the ability of city government to manage itself effectively. How are city workers doing? The number one thing that I think is affecting everybody right now is the fallout from this previous year, from the pandemic. That is the number one thing that's on anybody's mind when I talk to them. People in Parks and Rec over the summer, we had the whole thing where only one pool could be open at a time. They're short-staffed in their ability to do the summer programming. They were run ragged by the whole thing. And it was a huge problem that really didn't have an easy solution, even if you had, 5 Mike Van Milligans or 5 Shelley Stickfords to be able to do the job. I've had multiple conversations with firefighters and the police officers of all the groups. There are not many people right now who want to become a police officer. There are not many people who want to become a firefighter. It's a very hard job. They are understaffed because they can't find the people they need. I think that the departments in many ways are doing a lot of good things, but I think that from a staffing issue, this comes back to Mike's earlier question about making investment in our city. I really am I'm convinced at this point we need to make more investment in the basic services of firefighting and policing to be able to make sure that we have the services that we need. I think overall what you're going to hear from city workers is there's a level of burnout that is not sustainable. I really don't think that is the fault of any one person in city government. I think it is the nature of what's going on right now, because all I've seen since I've been there since 2020 is improvement and people saying that we are one of the better city governments in Iowa. And I want to throw in one. I know I'm getting long-winded on some of these answers, but I want to throw in one more important thing. I'm on the executive board for the Iowa League of Cities. One of the things I did there was I called a bunch of people from the league to say, hey, come to our annual conference this year. In those conversations, multiple city administrators and city clerks, especially from other cities, made a point to say how impressed they are with Dubuque city government. And I don't think that we talk about that enough. I really do think that there are people across the state that look to Dubuque and say, you're functioning at a very high level. How do you pull it off? We're never going to be perfect. People are going to make mistakes, but at the same time, I really do think that we are potentially, at least from what I'm hearing, one of the best in the state.
Was that reference to more of an investment in those police and fire services? Are you talking about like increasing wages for those folks?
I'm actually talking about increasing staffing. We need more firefighters and we need more police officers. I think, I can say that and say we should do it and open up the positions. Whether or not we're able to fill them is a whole other question. Now, I was very pleased that the city manager decided to expand the boundaries that city workers could live within. Early in 2021, I believe, is when he decided to do that. And that was something that especially the firefighters were advocating heavily for. And I was very pleased to see that occurred because I think it helped with recruiting. And it made us more in line with what other cities in Iowa are. The staffing issue is the same. I mean, what I'm hearing is that we may not be entirely in line with what other cities are. And it's something that I want to continue to push and talk about as we start to get into the budget session next year.
Brad, I'd like to ask you a little bit more of a general question here.
Yeah.
You had to, in a nutshell, explain to somebody what it is that differentiates you between you and your competitor. What would that be?
So I really respect David. I mean, I always have to start with that. I think David has done, I mean, he's served the community well, and he's done it for a long time. And, he's taught me a lot on the council. I think that I think we've worked very well together. In fact, I work very well with everybody. So I always want to preface with that because, you have to be careful. I don't want to say anything that would disparage him in any way, because I have no desire to do that whatsoever. And I also think that I just think it's poor form, and I wish politicians would quit doing it. I wish people who are running for elections would just stop cutting each other down. So I think a couple of different things. For one, this talk of investment and how we need to invest in the community, we talk about it differently. What I hear from David is generally, a desire to it's really just reduce the debt, keep taxes low. I don't hear about investing when we need to invest. I don't hear about using debt wisely, because it goes back to my example of buying a car. There are ways that municipalities can use debt wisely. And in fact, I mean, before my time, David voted for that, as, being able to do that for the wastewater treatment plant as an example. And I think that was a very good investment. So I think we need to talk about investing in order to make progress. And that's what we need to discuss when we talk about taxation. A really big difference that I've seen throughout this race and through is our style in reaching out to people. As far as I can tell, there is nobody in town who is running around as much as I am to try and talk to as many people as we can. And I know that there's always the accusation that, oh, you're just doing that to get votes. But really, that's not entirely untrue. I mean, I want people to vote for me, obviously. But really what I'm doing as I go around is I'm getting a good sense of where people are. What are people thinking about? And I'm not just talking to 10 or 20 people. I'm talking to thousands of people. Is it a good indication of what the entire community is thinking about? Well, statistically, it's not a terrible one. I'm actually getting out to talk to quite a few people. And I think that's a big difference in our style, is that I'm willing to talk to people of all parts of the community, all socioeconomic status, everywhere people live, people of different races. I want to talk to as many people as I can. And what I'm trying to show people is that's the style that you're going to get in your next mayor. So I think those are two very different things. I also think that, we have different levels of expertise on different things, but I think some of the things that are most important right now that we need to talk about are things that I've been hitting on for a long time. Talking about our poverty rate, especially within specific groups in our community, and I'll say specifically within the African-American population within Dubuque. I mean, incredibly high poverty rate. As a social worker, I've worked in poverty for my entire career, really. And it's something that I think when we talk about like the equitable poverty reduction and prevention plan, I understood that plan. I understand what's going on. I have a sense of what that means, because it's something that I've been talking about and studying and sharing with people, in teaching for a very long time. I would say that those are some of the biggest differences. I had one other thing in mind, but that's probably enough for now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Brad, you started off our conversation a little bit ago talking about how you maybe feel as though Mayor Buell has elevated the position in terms of visibility and time required and so on, and his commitment, and again, not necessarily a bad thing. I guess maybe talk a little bit about, in addition to your style, but just talk a little bit about your ability to the time commitments of the job of mayor. It's a little bit more than just being a regular council member, and your ability to meet those time commitments, what you expect those to be, and how you'll handle that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Bob. I don't know. It's funny because I don't exactly have a great sense of what, having watched Mayor Buell for the last 2 years, I don't have the best sense of what exactly the time commitments are going to be going forward, because it's been such a weird 2 years, But that said, there are a couple things that I think are incredibly important for the mayor of Dubuque to be able to accomplish. We're not just, the person who becomes mayor is not just the face of the city, not just the voice of the city in a lot of ways, doesn't just work within the city council here and lead that council and lead city government, but is also a advocate across the state of Iowa and across the country. Mayor Buell, I think, has done that very well. I think he's understood that role. I think along, in partnership with Terry Goodman, has really been effective at reaching out to get the resources and the support that we need from our federal government and our state government. I did get that right away. I mean, in March of 2020, right before the pandemic hit, there was a conference for the National League of Cities that I attended. And I did that because I understood that it was important for somebody from Dubuque to be there. And apparently I didn't really realize this, but previous councils leading up to this, there weren't that many people who were all that involved with the National League of Cities or the Iowa League of Cities. So that's a big difference between us right now and some previous councils, I understand. Laura Roussell's very involved. I believe David Resnick's on one of the boards in the National League of Cities. I'm on the League of Cities board. So I went to DC. I sat down with Senator Grassley. I sat down with a member of Senator Ernst's staff and Congresswoman Finkenauer at the time, and advocated for the current version of the infrastructure bill, and used, the direction of Terry Goodman and Mayor Buell and city staff to understand, what exactly it was we needed to advocate for. And I took on that role. I'm not just willing to do that. I enjoy doing it. I mean, it's actually a lot of fun to be able to go and say, listen, Senator Grassley, this is what we need to do, and this is why, and be able to have essentially an argument with Senator Grassley about this in a respectful way, and know that you're doing it for the sake of people in Dubuque. I enjoy that, and I'm ready to do it. And frankly, I'm going to keep doing it whether I win this election or not. I think it's an important role for a council member, but especially for a mayor. So I think that's one thing that it really sticks out as something that's going to have to happen and that I'm ready to do. From a time commitment standpoint, I'm very, very fortunate to be in the position that I am, personally and professionally, where I have a great deal of flexibility right now in my life and my career. So I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that to serve my community as best I can. I'm going to focus on public service in this way, and I'm going to be able to build whatever I need to build from a career standpoint around what I'm doing in public service as well.
And remind me again, I know you were at Loras for many years, but
Yeah.
remind me what you're doing now.
Right now, I'm running for mayor. Honestly,
Okay.
That's what I'm doing. Yeah. I didn't realize it at the time, Amy, but apparently I was part of the Great Resignation. I had no idea that I was part of a trend. I thought I was doing something very unique, but I was not. I mean, I did exactly what a huge chunk of the country did. I wasn't getting, and again, Loras was the best job that I've ever had in my life. They're great people there, and I loved it. But I was starting to feel a sense of burnout in the classroom that was just not going to work for students anymore. When I teach, I have a very high bar for myself, and I want to keep that bar very high. When I start to feel like I'm not able to give students what I need to give them, where I'm not really feeling the joy and the oomph of getting into the classroom to do that, it's time for me to go. And I made that decision. As a social worker, and just with the set of skills that I have, I'm not worried at all about my employability. I have a lot of things that I could decide to do, and I will make that decision after the election this year. But there are actually some other things that I've been working on that might lead to a self-employment for me, actually, and being able to work on some things that would also meet other community needs. So right now, the joke in my house is that, my wife has always been the one who has always had the main income for us. And one year I'm going to make more money than her. I've always told her that, but I don't know if I'm actually going to get there. So I'm in a fortunate position to be able to do this right now and focus on this, and then be able to work employment around that.
Okay. I want to be respectful of folks' time here because we got a little bit of a late start, but I do want to ask you about parking. So kind of quickly, both from the standpoint of the Cottingham and Butler HTLF parking ramp, and then just kind of your general view about parking in downtown Dubuque. Do we have too many parking ramps? What do you think it does to the aesthetic?
Yeah. So currently, at this very moment, right now, I don't know of anybody who knows exactly what our parking needs are in the city of Dubuque. I haven't heard really good numbers coming from either city government or any businesses or any groups about what is our current parking situation in this very moment, given the businesses that aren't back yet, the businesses that are back halftime, all that. So I want that question answered first and foremost before we talk about adding any new parking. I know that we need parking downtown if we want development. So, and what I've said over and over is, if all of a sudden we have a solid sense that, let's say, the Farley Letcher building that's right down there by where the, in the millwork, right by where this parking ramp is proposed, or the old Genwell building that's right there too. If there's a good sense that all of a sudden those are going to be developed and we're suddenly going to have almost no parking for a bunch of people who are going to be living there, obviously there's a major need that we're going to need to address in that moment. But we don't have that sense right now, in a way that I'm aware of, at least. We don't have that sense that the businesses that are currently there are lacking in parking. So in general, I need numbers. We need to make this based on evidence and not just on a feeling or a gut instinct that there's, something that's going to happen. I also have a sense that I think Heartland and Cottingham and Butler understand this. And I think that they know that the world has changed from when they made the deal in 2019. I have no desire to be a city that backs out on deals that you make with major companies that have decided to make their home here. That is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is we need numbers to show that even the Heartland and Cottingham and Butler folks need the parking spaces to be able to build a new ramp down there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else, folks, that you wanted to hear Brad speak on before we let him go? And what about you, Brad? Anything else that you want to leave us with?
Just to thank you again for the opportunity. I mean, I always enjoy the opportunity to sit down and talk with you. I know we don't get a chance to talk like this very often. And I will say too, I enjoy working with John Cruz. I appreciate when he calls. He definitely is working to ask the questions that need to be asked, and he's paying attention to all the things that are going on the agenda. And I said this in my last interview with you when I ran for council, and I'm just going to keep repeating it because I know the essential role that you play in our community, and I'm glad that you're there to play that role. And whatever you can do to keep that way, please do. And whatever I can do to make sure that you remain, an essential function of what we are as a democracy here in Dubuque, I want to keep doing that. I try my best to be honest with you. I try my best to be upfront. I appreciate when you call, and I always try to call back. I don't think more than a handful of times I've not been able to call back. So thank you very much for everything that you're doing.
Well, thank you for saying that. We appreciate that. Appreciate your service on the council and putting yourself out there for mayor. I know that's a huge responsibility to take on. So thanks for speaking with us today, and we wish you luck the rest of the way.
All right. Thank you very much. Everybody have a great weekend.
You too.
Thanks a lot, Brad.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I'm going to stop my recording.